You're living here for a measly sum. My husband's words made my mouth twitch in annoyance. That's right. You don't do any housework, sleep for 5 hours, and you're just squatting in Denise's house. You're like the black sheep of the family. Why don't you just leave? Black sheep, huh? Who's the real black sheep here? A subtle smile escaped my tightened lips at my mother-in-law's words. I just didn't care anymore. Is that so? Well, if you insist, I'll take my leave. That was the last time I saw my mother-in-law and husband. My name is Carlin Mavey. I'm 32 and work for a notable company in Boston. It's a pretty big firm. Work there earnestly for a decade, and you'll find yourself in a respectable position with a decent income. 2 years ago, I married Dennis, who works for a similar-sized company. We lived in a newly built house. To everyone around us, it must have seemed like smooth sailing. I met Dennis, who's a year older than me, through a friend's introduction. My first impression was that he seemed sincere. He often talked about his mother, and I liked that he valued family. We didn't have a fiery romantic start, but we kind of started dating and then kind of got married. Even after marriage, we had no children because we both needed to continue working. We lived in a house too big for just the two of us, enjoying a comfortable newlywed life. Because we were both working, we often missed each other, but we made sure to value the time we spent together, and we had no financial problems. I thought we were doing well, until now. Unlike me, who had lived alone since starting college, Dennis lived with his parents until just before our marriage. Born and raised in Boston, both his college and current workplace were not far from his family home. I only knew his late father through photos. Dennis was still in high school when his father passed away. He probably didn't want to leave his mother alone. I met my mother-in-law for the first time at a dinner arranged for both families to meet. Dennis had told me his mother was about the same age as my own, but she looked much younger, a truly beautiful woman. Nice to meet you, Carlin. My son speaks so highly of you. Please take good care of him. My mother-in-law smiled warmly as she spoke. I couldn't sense any of the hardship she must have endured after losing her husband. Nice to meet you too, mother-in-law. I'm looking forward to becoming family, I replied, feeling relieved. I thought that this person and I might actually build a good family relationship together. Our home seemed to promise a fulfilling future, always filled with laughter and warmth. Both my parents and my mother-in-law were fully supportive of our marriage, and the preparations moved along surprisingly smoothly. We set the date for the wedding, and our house under construction was nearly complete. Before embarking on our married life, we made some decisions. We agreed we'd both work for a while, so we needed to pre-plan chores, taking care of mother-in-law, and financial matters. Firstly, chores would be handled by whoever was available at the time. Regarding my mother-in-law, she was still healthy and had my father-in-law's inheritance, so she wouldn't struggle financially. We decided it would be best if we lived separately. Up to this point, all was good. But then came the issue of money. I thought splitting all expenses, including the mortgage, would be fair. Dennis had different ideas. He proposed that I handle the mortgage payments while he took care of other living expenses. This gave me pause. I had heard of couples splitting everything or pooling resources, but Dennis's suggestion was unusual. The monthly mortgage alone was $2,700. I had thought from the beginning that this was too heavy a burden. The 3-story house was too big, even if we were to have children, and the large property, mostly chosen by Dennis, seemed daunting to manage. Looking back, I realized I had already made several wrong choices, but I wasn't thinking clearly at the time. I didn't want any financial disagreements before marriage, so I convinced myself to agree with Dennis's proposal. In addition to the mortgage, there were other costs like groceries, utility bills, and taxes. I had no idea how much I would regret that decision later on. Every month, we put all our payments into a joint account in Dennis's name. This included the mortgage, living expenses, travel costs, and future savings. The monthly withdrawals were hefty, but we were both high earners to begin with. Given our busy work schedules and limited time off, the joint account should have been continually growing. Why isn't there as much money as I expected? I stumbled upon it by chance. I casually opened our savings book to see how much we had saved up, wondering if we had some major expenses. I couldn't recall anything significant. That left the possibility that Dennis might have spent on something, but he didn't mention anything during our last family meeting. We both had busy work schedules. I left before Dennis woke up, and he came home after I'd gone to bed, so we often didn't get to talk much even though we lived together. To break through this disconnect, we started having regular family meetings. We discussed big financial decisions like how to spend our savings and future travel plans. We just had a family meeting a few days ago. Seeing our savings dwindle without hearing anything about it at the meeting was odd. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, I thought, scanning through the latest transactions. I realized Dennis hadn't transferred his share of the living expenses for this month. I glanced at the calendar. It had been 3 days since payday. We were supposed to contribute our share by then. Maybe he just forgot. Dennis was coming home late today, so I decided to ask him gently tomorrow and then forgot all about it. 3 months later, I remembered. Come to think of it, I never actually checked. Did he make the transfer like he was supposed to? With that thought, I opened the drawer in our living room TV stand and pulled out the bank book for our joint account, which was under Dennis's name. I flipped through the pages and my eyes widened. What's going on here? The balance had decreased even more since last time. A growing sense of distrust filled me. I could hear my own heartbeat ringing in my ears. A sinking feeling crossed my mind, and with trembling fingers, I flipped the pages back. My worst fears were confirmed. You've got to be kidding me, I muttered. Household expenses hadn't been transferred for 3 months. Dennis didn't come home until late that night, and we missed each other the next morning. I couldn't confront him due to our conflicting schedules and my growing unease. Finally, I caught him on the weekend and declared that we were having an emergency family meeting. Dennis reluctantly sat on the living room sofa and looked at me, his face serious as if he knew I had discovered the truth. You know what this is about, don't you? As much as I wanted to explode in anger, I started the conversation as calmly as possible. Dennis nodded quietly. Why haven't the household expenses been paid for the last 3 months? The truth is, what Dennis told me was beyond anything I could have imagined. To cut to the chase, Dennis had quit his job without telling me. This all started 4 months ago. My coworker got promoted before me. Can you believe it? A guy less competent than me. The boss is clueless. The company is a mess. What's the point of staying at a place that can't even evaluate people properly? I was stunned. I couldn't find the words to respond. Sure, it's frustrating to be surpassed by a coworker. I get that, but we have a family and we just built our house. Shouldn't you secure another job before quitting? Isn't that just common sense? I thought he was a man of integrity. That's why I married him. I didn't recognize this man who spoke so rashly. So what's the plan? You were going to find another job, right? Of course, I want to show them. I'm planning to get a job at an even bigger company, so cover our living expenses till then. Dennis replied, unfazed, as if he didn't grasp the gravity of the situation. He didn't even apologize. Not that I needed an apology, but the sense of betrayal was overwhelming. Everyone has times when they're unhappy at work and want to quit. I don't love my job every single day either. What hurt most was that he didn't even consult me first. So I agreed to cover the expenses, but only for a short time. Dennis seemed to be actively job hunting while I was at work. Initially, I thought it would be fine. There were job magazines on our living room table, and I figured he'd find something soon. But months passed, and I began to realize I had been too optimistic. A year went by, and Dennis still hadn't found a job. You've been supporting me for a year now. Can't you just keep doing it? You're the one with the stable income anyway, he said. I was already struggling with the mortgage, and the cost of living was piling up, making me work harder than ever before. I willingly took on overtime and even worked weekends. I barely had time to breathe, let alone handle chores. I was sleep-deprived and disoriented. I almost fainted on the train to work today. Dennis's offhand comment didn't sound like a joke to me, and even if it were, I couldn't take it that way. What was the point of our marriage? Of me working so hard? I began to lose sight of everything. I'm going out, I mumbled, knowing Dennis probably wouldn't hear me, and headed for the door. Today was another work day. I had to make money no matter what. Dragging my feet to work, I survived the day on willpower alone. I finally headed home more exhausted than when the day started. It was already past 10 p.m. and dark outside. I'm home, I called out as I pushed the door open. I noticed something unfamiliar in the entranceway. A pile of cardboard boxes. What's this? I wondered. They were too old and sloppily packed to be delivery boxes. Just then, the living room door opened, and Dennis appeared, his face covered in stubble. Oh, they're for my mom. She was having a hard time living alone, so we decided she should move in with us. What? I didn't hear anything about this, I said, my anger surging. Living together? What on earth was he talking about? Ever since he quit his job without telling me, I had no idea what he was thinking. I used to worry about his mother living alone, and I'd even thought we could have a good family relationship. But I didn't know then that my seemingly cheerful and pleasant mother-in-law would turn out to be a real piece of work. The same could be said for my husband, too. What are you talking about? She's my mother. Helping her is a given. Are you stupid or something? Dennis's tone was dismissive. At this point, my opinion didn't matter anymore. I had enough of understanding this throughout my married life. A few days later, my mother-in-law showed up with a big grin. She hugged Dennis at the front door and gave me a sarcastic smile. "Oh, Carlin, you're here. I heard you're always busy with work, so I assumed you wouldn't be around," she said. Her words, "You probably don't do much housework, do you?" cracked my already fragile heart even more. My malevolent mother-in-law and my unemployed husband Dennis had finally pushed me to my breaking point. I couldn't see any hope for the future. Life with my mother-in-law was harder than I had ever imagined. When I'd get home late from work, she'd snark, "What are you doing not taking care of the house? You're failing as a wife." Dennis, far from defending me, would add insult to injury. "I'm letting you live in my house, so at least do the housework." How easy it would have been to say, "You're not working, so why don't you do it?" But no, that would only lead to more insults and emotional wounds. I didn't even have the energy to argue back anymore. My mother-in-law would just loaf around the house all day, never doing any housework, as if it were the norm. Dennis had become so entitled to being taken care of that the job listing magazines had disappeared from our living room. The only thing I could do while dealing with these two burdens was to work relentlessly. I needed money to live, but more than that, being engrossed in my job allowed me to forget the harsh reality. People around me probably found it strange to see me more focused on work than I was before getting married, despite not being married for very long. Occasionally, I felt concerned glances my way, but I was grateful they didn't say anything. If someone showed me kindness now, I was afraid I wouldn't be able to go on. Long days of working late, catching the last train home, squeezing in just 5 hours of sleep, and then heading back to the office as soon as dawn broke had become my routine. At this point, weekdays and weekends didn't even matter. But I did plan on taking a half day off sometime this weekend. The fact that I had to use that precious half day for a family meeting to tell those two that we couldn't continue living like this, especially when my savings kept dwindling, almost broke me. I knew my mother-in-law was constantly ordering food delivery, but recently even Dennis had been joining in. They'd been indulging in steak and caviar during the day. What's worse, they'd even been taking trips together. For now, they were just day trips, but it could escalate to international travel. I used to put extra money into our joint account, but after realizing how much they were spending, I now only transferred just enough to cover the monthly withdrawals. In other words, if they kept up the spending, payments would start falling behind, leading to a worst-case scenario. So here we are, the three of us gathered in the living room over the weekend. The two of them, now shadows of their former friendly and genuine selves, are glaring at the papers I've spread out on the coffee table. "What's the meaning of this, Carlin? What are you trying to say with all this paperwork?" My mother-in-law squints up at me. "It's a breakdown of our income and expenses. We can't continue living like this. I told you I'll pay it back when I get a job. Just hold on a bit. And the mortgage is just a measly $2,700. I'm letting you live in my house, so don't make a fuss over such a measly sum." "My house? You're letting me live here?" Measly sum. Words I can't ignore make my lips twitch. That's right, you're the black sheep here, sleeping 5 hours a day, not doing any housework, and living in Dennis's house. Why don't you just leave? Black sheep? Who's the real black sheep here? A laugh escapes my tightened lips at my mother-in-law's words. Everything suddenly becomes inconsequential, or maybe, just maybe, I finally realized that there was never any need to try so hard. All right, no more bending over backward, not for these people. I felt like a weight had lifted from my body and soul. Is that so? Well then, I'll take you up on that and leave. My voice echoed in the once quiet living room. I must be smiling more than I ever have before. Ha! What? Both of them looked stunned, their eyes glued to the coffee table. What I smoothly pulled off and placed on top of the papers was a bundle of divorce papers. Of course, they were already filled out and stamped by me. "Here, you sign it too. It'll make your mom feel more secure, won't it?" Mumbling, Dennis picked up the pen from the table. He hesitated for a moment but was encouraged by his gleeful mother to sign. I'll be moving out within this month. Don't worry, I'll submit these papers to the court immediately after the move. Fine. Goodbye. Black sheep, whatever they called me, my heart was unshaken. 2 weeks later, the day had finally come. The weather was perfect, with a pleasant breeze blowing. It was the perfect day to start a new life. I need this and that move too, yes, everything as I instructed, I told the movers as I bustled around what had become someone else's home. After all, I had to move everything that was purchased with my money or had a receipt in my name. Hey, you're taking the coffee table, the sofa, and even the TV. You're stripping the living room bare, you sneaky cat thief. They were both following me around, shouting. To be honest, they were just in the way. If you say this house under your name is yours, then all of this stuff paid for by me is mine, right? I finished my last set of instructions, let out a sigh, and turned around. The two of them fell silent at my words, looking at me bewildered. I glanced at them and turned on my heel. Well then, goodbye. That was the last time I saw both of them. I completed the move without any issues and immediately submitted the divorce papers. They were promptly accepted, and I was free. Not having to share mortgage payments or contribute to a joint account was a relief, and I was surprised at how much money I had left over. I never realized I was earning this much. Over the past year, paydays have been depressing. I was genuinely shocked when I realized my monthly payments. Later, I found out what happened to my ex-husband Dennis and my former mother-in-law after I left them. Because they lost me as the breadwinner, they started falling behind on all their bills. Demand letters started piling up at their home. Dennis, ever so proud, ignored all of it. He didn't consult with the bank or the IRS. Eventually, they were faced with demands for a lump sum payment. Unable to pay, Dennis borrowed money from a loan shark to cover it. But that wasn't the end of their problems. Realizing he couldn't avoid repaying loan sharks, Dennis finally swallowed his pride and started doing manual labor at a low-paying job. Had it not been for his period of unemployment, he could have found a more decent job, but that's none of my business now. As for my mother-in-law, her pension wasn't enough to live on, so she started working a part-time job. She's now a cashier and has a reputation as a lady who can do her job right. Not surprising for someone who was ungrateful, never worked, and just ordered food delivery all the time. But again, that's none of my business. As for me, I'm enjoying my single life. My skin has improved, and even I can tell that my expression has softened. People tell me I smile more now and that I've become more attractive. I hardly do any overtime work and can fully relax on weekends. I even have time to enjoy my hobbies. My life is just like it was before marriage, but because my married life was so miserable, everything now feels incredibly wonderful. I've also been getting along well with a popular guy at work. He had been interested in me for a while but hesitated to approach me because I was married. Anyway, life is smooth sailing this time around, that's for sure. I am feeling great today.